that's obsessed with fast hacks and quick wins, ruthless efficiency, and Instagram perfection, struggle has become taboo. It's a sign that something's gone horribly wrong. But what if we've got it all wrong about getting it wrong? What if struggle isn't a battle to fight or a trap to avoid or a sign of weakness or failure? What if struggle is precisely where the magic happens, where we do our best work? My name is Grace Marshall and I'm a productivity ninja. That's my official job title. That's actually what it says on my business cards and on my LinkedIn profile. And in my world of work and productivity, the words I'm struggling are often seen as the opposite of being productive. But I don't think that tells the full story of struggle or of productivity. So I'd like to start today a new conversation with you about struggle. And I'd like to start with a question. And that is, when the shit hits the fan, what is your go-to? What do you go to get a sense of control, a sense of like, I know how to do this? So this time last year, a lot of people went for this, toilet roll. So when faced with a global pandemic, when faced with the prospect of our lives, of our works turned upside down, what a lot of people went for was stockpiling toilet paper. Why? It wasn't even a stomach bug virus, but yet it gave a lot of people that sense of control, that sense of like, okay, I can't control what happens here. I can't control what decisions the government makes or the schools make, but what I can do is I can make sure we don't run out of toilet paper. So I'm going to go do that. So I'm going to come back to this question later of what is your toilet roll? What's the thing that you tend to go to when you feel like there's a whole load of uncertainty, there's a whole load of discomfort, there's stuff that you can't control? What do you tend to go to get that sense of control? But before that, let's look at some areas where we tend to struggle and where we may have experienced some struggle in the last year. The first is crisis, setbacks, disruptions, disappointments, when things go wrong. So when things go wrong, we tend to see that as a sense of crisis, don't we? Or a sense of like, it's work interrupted, it's getting in the way of my work. Clearly, we had a lot of that at the beginning of the pandemic, like, gosh, a sense of crisis. So for us as a training organization at Think Productive, it's like, we cannot travel anymore. We can't deliver any of our workshops face-to-face. And we do very practical face-to-face workshops. But if we stop for a minute and think about failures, think about when things go wrong. If I asked you about famous failures, what might you think of? You might think of Thomas Edison and his 10,000 ways that he found not to make a light bulb. You might think of J.K. Rowling, who hit rock bottom before she wrote Harry Potter, or people like Richard Branson, who dropped out of school, or even Bill Gates, who was a Harvard dropout. And we tend to see these examples as examples of tenacity and persistence. So they'd had a lot of wrong turns before they got it right. But actually, what if the wrong turn is precisely where the magic happens? You see, our brains are lazy. We're biased towards the familiar and the things that we know well, the things we know how to do well. So we might have all good intentions to think innovatively and to think we need to innovate, we need to develop, we need to find creative new ways of doing things. But given the choice, our brain tends to be biased and tends to prioritize the things that we know how to do already. That's why we like efficiency, because it's just about doing the same things but faster and maybe slightly better. And that kind of improvement can only ever be incremental. In order to make big leaps in innovation, quite often what we need is a disruption to that status quo. We need to leave, we need to have a departure from how we're doing things currently and how we're doing things right now to do something completely new and to experiment with new ways of working. And for a lot of us, that pandemic gave us that opportunity. So a lot of companies that have been talking for ages about remote working or virtual delivery found that they had to do it. And by having to do it, they realized, okay, the thing we've been resisting for so long, guess what? We're going to have to do it anyway. So let's learn how to do that. And then let's figure out how we do that well. And so sometimes what we find is that in the middle of crisis, there is an opportunity that probably wasn't there before. Because when things are too plain sailing, we don't want to disrupt the status quo. But when the status quo is well and truly disrupted, that's when we find that we have a certain freedom to experiment, a certain tolerance for imperfection, and maybe a certain necessity to do things new and to discover those new grounds. And then there are times when we get things wrong. So when we make mistakes. Now, we tend to avoid mistakes, don't we? Because mistakes are costly. It might cost us time and attention to fix the mistake, or to clean up the mess, or to work around what's gone wrong. But also it costs us in our reputation, in our relationships. So it's no wonder that as human beings, we tend to avoid making mistakes. But the question is, what's the cost of avoiding mistakes? And is that cost maybe a little bit higher than the cost of making mistakes? So to give you an example, my husband works in the IT industry. He's a fairly experienced developer, and he tends to find that junior developers often come to him to ask for his advice, or to ask questions that he has the answers to, or maybe just to ask him to help to fix a problem. And he's quite happy to help, and he sees part of his role is about mentoring junior developers. But what he notices is that they often come to him to ask the question before they've even given themselves time to think about it. And actually, if they gave themselves some time to think about it, to maybe verbalize the problem, then they would be able to fix it themselves. And by doing so, they would also learn how to fix the problem in the future. But they don't do that because it's quicker to get the answer from him. And this, I think, is a product of our culture, because our culture values speed. Our performance is often measured by speed. How quickly can you get stuff done? And so for those junior developers, if they're measured by speed, the quickest way to get to success is by asking the question rather than figuring out for yourself. So that's what we're going to keep doing. But if we keep doing that, what we end up with is a whole load of people who don't learn, who don't develop that competency for themselves, and a whole load of experienced people who are overloaded with interruptions, who become the bottleneck because they don't have time to deal with the stuff that only they can do, because they're busy dealing with all the stuff that other people could do, but can get done quicker if they ask them to do it for them, or to think about it for them. So there's a cost there individually, but there's also a cost there culturally to the organization. And that comes a lot from our culture, and our culture is often built by conversations. It's built by the language that we use. So if you think about it, how often do you have conversations around speed? So things like, thanks for getting back to me so quickly, or how quickly can you get this done, or how soon can you deliver? Compared to maybe conversations around learning or development or innovation, like, what's new? What are you discovering? What are you developing? What are you wrestling with right now? We very rarely have those conversations compared to how often we have conversations about speed. So if we want to change this, maybe it's time to build a culture that embraces making mistakes, that embraces it as a place of learning, rather than a culture that maybe blames or shames people into covering up mistakes, avoiding mistakes, or maybe overworking and getting into a behavior of perfectionism because they're so hell-bent on avoiding mistakes that they have to get things absolutely right. And they end up spending far more time and attention than that piece of work actually requires of them. And then there are times when our struggle is with each other. So maybe when I think you're wrong, or when you think I'm wrong. So times of conflict, or times of complaints, maybe. I wonder, how do you tend to deal with conflicts? Are you a rhino or are you a hedgehog? Rhinos tend to charge in. They tend to see a conflict as a battle. They have to kind of get their opinion across. They have to fix it. They have to take control, and they have to win the argument. Whereas hedgehogs tend to withdraw. They curl up in a ball, they stick their prickles out, and they say, stay away. I'm not having any part of this. They're the ones who go, do you know what? I'm not even going to listen to you. I'm just going to switch off my email. I'm going to do what I'm doing. I'm not going to even take any notice of you. Or I'm just going to avoid having that conversation and maybe hope that it'll blow away. Now, I'm always fascinated to see how people who have customer-facing roles, maybe people who deal with customer complaints, how they look at conflict. And there was a situation a few years ago where I was at Waterloo Station. So if I take you back to, it's a hot summer's day, Waterloo Station is buzzing with people, lots of commuters, lots of travelers. And all of a sudden, all of the boards start to show delay. Delayed, 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 maybe some cancelled as well. There's a crowd gathering on the platform. People are getting angry, they're getting stressed, they're getting confused, they're worried. Some people have run across the platform to try and jump on a train hoping it's going to leave, but actually they're just stuck, rammed in this kind of sardine tin, and it's going nowhere. Now, some people are, some of the kind of staff on the platform are standing their ground. They're getting het up, they're getting confrontational. They're going, well, I can't do anything about it. And they're kind of, getting het up in the battle. Some people are just kind of burying their head in the sand. So one train company, I noticed, turned off their Twitter feed. So people were tweeting them to ask, well, what do I do? And, please help me. And are there any alternatives? And how do I get out of London? And they are not answering at all. They've just switched off their Twitter feed. They're going, well, let's wait until it blows over and then we'll come back online because there's nothing we can do anyway about it. But there's a third type of person. And what I noticed was in the middle of the platform, there was this one lone guard who was in the middle of the crowd, making eye contact, having conversations, kind of shrugging his shoulder and going, sorry, I don't have the answers here, or I don't really know much more than you do. But what he was doing was he was showing up and he was connecting with the people. And he was bringing a sense of humanity, a sense of connection, sometimes even a sense of humor, and a sense of sanity to that situation. So he wasn't able to fix anything. It wasn't able to make the struggle go away, but he saw things differently. He didn't see struggle as a battle to fight or a problem to solve or something that he needed to get right on or even a trap to avoid. He saw it as a place to show up and just bring whatever he could bring. So he had to let go of having the right answers, but what he could do was show up and connect with people. And it's people like this who actually find that they can build relationships in the middle of conflict. And it's companies like this who end up coming out of a crisis looking better and building better relationships and having stronger reputations and brands rather than, even compared to when things were going well. So when things go wrong, they see it as an opportunity to show up even better. And actually they get better results as a result of that. And then there are times when nothing's wrong. It's just hard. It just feels like a slog. We're stuck in a lull, or we're just stuck on something that's really like wading in treacle. And sometimes that's a struggle too, right? And the problem is when we see that as a sign that something's gone wrong, or maybe there's a sign that something's wrong with us, what we will want to go to, what our brain will want to do is look for what's right and maybe look for what's easier. So it might be like, do you know what? I need to work out this new strategy, or really need to write this book, but it is bloody hard right now. And guess what? It's so much easier to go answer a few emails. It's so much easier to go and tick off a few things on my to-do list, because let's face it, I'm really busy as well. So it's actually easier to be distracted by all the busy work rather than being stuck in the middle of the really important but hard work. Because fear is how we often respond to struggle. And when we respond to struggle with fear, fear says basically danger, keep out. Like, this is a threat, this is hard, don't go there. What we need is courage, because courage says this is sacred ground, enter. So we've been reading the signs all wrong. We've been reading signs of like nerves as a sign that we're maybe not cut out for this, but actually nerves can be a sign that we care. We've been reading a sign of struggle as like, maybe I'm doing the wrong thing here, or maybe I'm not cut out for this. But maybe struggle is a sign that you're doing absolutely the right thing. Maybe instead of this is work interrupted, or this is something getting in the way of my work, maybe actually this is the work. This is absolutely where I need to be paying my attention right now, and sitting with that and working through that. And that also applies to how we support each other in struggle as well. So sometimes we see other people struggling and we just want to fix it for them. I admit I'm a fixer. I like to be able to fix things for people. And a lot of my job is about that. A lot of people pay me to fix their productivity problems. But some problems are not there for me to be fixed. And I've learned a lot of this actually through my parenting experience. So my kids are now 12 and 15, but when they were babies, every time they cried, every time they needed something from me, they basically needed me to be the fixer. They needed me to fix things for them. It's too cold, fix that for me. I'm hungry, fix that for me. I'm tired, I need to sleep. It's all about fixing problems. But actually at their age now, what they need from me isn't to be the fixer. They need to know that they can fix things for themselves. And if I say to them, oh no, it's not that hard, let me do it for you, what I say to them is, oh, you shouldn't be struggling. You shouldn't find this hard. There's something wrong with you. So actually what they need to hear from me is, yeah, it is hard. And you know what? We can do hard things. That's one of my favorite sayings from an author called Glennon Doyle. We can do hard things. And because when I say that to them, they realize, it's normal to struggle. And it's okay to know that this is hard. And this is the work right here. I can struggle. And my job in that moment isn't to take the struggle away from them. It's to be with them in the struggle. It's to witness, to give them my empathy, to go, I struggle too. Yeah, I find things hard too. And it's okay. You've got this and I'm with you. And so what I'd like to leave with you with is a new way of thinking about struggle. So a fresh way of dealing with struggle. So these are my 3 R's of struggle, or my 3 shits of struggle. See, the old way of dealing with struggle was we go straight from recognizing struggle to looking for a resolution. We go straight for like, what's the toilet roll? So when the shit hits the fan, what's my toilet roll? What's my go-to? How do I fix this problem? Well, what I'd like to suggest instead is 3 things. The first is recognition. It's, oh shit, recognizing the pain or the difficulty or the struggle. Because if we don't give ourselves that moment to recognize it, what we will do is jump straight to, how do I fix this? How do I fight this? How do I avoid this? But actually, the first step just needs to be, shit, this hurts, or this is hard, or this has gone wrong. Sit with that. The second step is, what is this shit? And actually reckoning with, what am I actually dealing with here? So what looks like anger could just be confusion. What looks like dismissive could just be distracted. Sometimes our first go-to when we respond with that fight or flight fear response, we see what we want to see. We see patterns. We look for good or bad, good guy, bad guy, safe, dangerous. We look for black and white certainty, and that's not always what's going on. So instead, what we can do is invite some curiosity. And if we activate curiosity, we find that it's the antidote to fear. We can start asking questions like, what does this look like, but what else could it also be? What is the opportunity in the middle of this crisis? Looks like lots of things have gone wrong, but what's going right now? And maybe what's the beauty that's in the middle of the thing that's really hard? Joy and sadness can coexist. They're not mutually exclusive. So maybe what are the good things at the same time as what are the really hard things? And when we start to reckon with that, that's when we get to the third thing, which is the revelation. It's the holy shit. So we have, oh shit, what is the shit? And then holy shit. It's the revelation. It's what we discover in the middle of that shitty moment. It's the truth, the beauty, the opportunity hidden in life's shittier moments. And that's the title of my book. It's Struggle, the surprising truth, beauty, and opportunity hidden in life's shittier moments. And that's a new conversation that I want to start with you about struggle. So it's not about trying to fix it or fight with it or kind of avoid it and run away from it. But actually, if we stay in the middle of that tunnel, so it's not about finding light at the end of the tunnel or about like every cloud has a silver lining. It's about shining a light in the middle of the tunnel, because that's where the work is. There is work to be done in the middle of that tunnel. If we shine a light on it, if we're willing to stay there, if we're willing to ask good questions and figure out what am I actually dealing with, we find that we discover far more out of that struggle than if we just hold on tight and try and get to the end of it. So that's the conversation I want to start with you today around struggle. I'm looking forward to your questions, and I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation with you. To find out more about the book, please head to strugglethebook.com. So that's strugglethebook.com, where you'll be able to find out more about the book and also sign up for the Struggle Conversation, which is a special evening I'm holding exclusively for readers who pre-order the book or who order the book during launch. So if you've ordered the book and you've read it early, then you can come and join us in the Struggle Conversation over there. But in the meantime, I'm looking forward to your questions. So thank you very much for listening.